Maybe this is not a necessary thing to do, but I wanted to add conduits for all the lights in the horn. I used 0.3mm copper wire for the wiring. I followed the drawing and the pics I showed you at the end of my previous update. It was some tedious work because the super glue stuck to everything but the wire. Well, in the end I got what I wanted. Some short strips of aluminum foil were used as clamps for the conduits. I draped a small piece of tissue paper over the right position light of the StuG. Since I had only one clear part left from the Panzer III I, the difference would have been too obvious to leave it as it was. Then something unexpected happened. In step 14 of the Dragon instructions, 3 parts appeared that were nowhere mentioned before. The position light, the horn and the tail light on the right fender. They should have been added in step 8, but they were forgotten by the designers of the instructions. I guess that's what happens when you try to put all parts for the subassembly into one step. You could argue that at least the tail light was an obvious part to add, and I give you that. On the other hand, there were no holes in the rear fender which would have made it clear that some parts were missing. And even if there had been holes, you wouldn't have known the part numbers. You would have had to search for them on all sprues. Well, except for the clear part, which I already used on the StuG. Since I also used the horn on the StuG, I had to build it from scratch using parts for a headlight. I had to use one of the plastic position lights, and in order to make it look like the clear part, I drilled it out. Now the horn sits in an incorrect position. It should have been attached a little more to the rear. That was my fault, of course. If it doesn't look any good after priming, I'll have to deal with it in a similar way as with the right position light on the StuG. Then it was time for wiring the Panzer's lights the same way as on the StuG. Funny though that I had the same problems with the super glue. A real challenge for my non-existent patience. The plastic tow cables on the Panzer III I didn't look too bad, but I had already glued the separate clamps on the engine deck. I wanted to show the tow cables as if they had been used and then stowed away again in a hurry. Getting them back on in the right position after use is very difficult in real life, and that's what I wanted to show. I made the tow cables myself according to my tutorial on that. The original plan was to use the Dragon eyes for the cables, but the plastic was very brittle. They simply fell to pieces while I was trying to cut them off the cables. I used the separate eyes from the Tamiya kit instead. For my taste, it was impossible to use the one-piece tow cable that came with the StuG I kit. It looked as flat as if it had been ironed. But I used the clamps on both rear corners. I cut them off and drilled a 1mm hole into both of them. The other clamps were made from aluminum foil. I had to use the eyes of the original tow cable, but that wasn't too difficult in this case. Holes of 0.8mm had to be drilled into the ends. Here you can see both tow cables before bending them. And with one of the eyes glued in place. The position of the eyes in the middle isn't perfect, but there'll be stowage added. That'll hide the worst bits. 2 rear fender supports were left from the Dragon kit. I thought they would look nice on the StuG. Last thing I did for this update was adding pieces of thin chain to the towing points and pintles.